Hello, and welcome to this spoiler version of my first impressions on Endgame. Hopefully, you get something out of this. So, spoilers for you. It's gonna say spoilers in the title. Spoilers. There are spoilers. Um, Endgame is a great film, and I really think that there's a lot of criticisms of it that are weird, and there are a lot of, I think, valid criticisms. I think that the film definitely worked well for rounding out um, everything that has been building up to the last 11 years. And here's why. Um, they've been building a lot of separate paths across each of these films. And they really brought a lot of the loose ends together in this last one. Um, One of the loose ends in particular that I think they rounded out really well um, was sort of how Tony Stark was going to be handled across the series, because he was sort of not really like the focal person for most of the films, but he was a focal person in every film, but he wasn't exactly the main focus of every film. Um, and I think they did a really good job handling his um, death in Endgame and really making it meaningful and making it not dumb, essentially. He lived up to him being intelligent and actually being, like, a good person by the end. Because if you go from Iron Man 1 to Endgame, there's a complete character 180 from what he was in Iron Man 1 to who he is in Endgame. And I think they did a decent job at showing the slow transition of character across the films, except with Civil War, because Civil War was... it was a good movie. I think that they got some character motivations a little fuzzy in there. It wasn't exactly in a line with how I thought the characters would act, and so that was a little off to me. But everything else went pretty well, and that's no fault of Endgame's. Um, but I think that they did a great job just handling the amount of loss that happened in the film, and basically it didn't feel like they were just throwing these characters out because their contracts were up. It felt like they were actually um, like meaningfully dying, which is always a hard thing to do, especially when you have several movies leading up to them of storyline associated with them. And I think that that's going to be, um, I think that's going to be a great model for future film writers and future editors as a whole, future writers. Seeing how you put a character arc together and how you actually put together your um, idea as to who the character is. And I think the best thing is that they managed to do that with several different directors, and the storyline stayed pretty consistent. Not all the time, but I feel like the Russo brothers in particular did a really good job at looking at what all the other directors did and sort of bringing it all to one point and ending it. They also did a really good job at keeping loose ends, so keeping the possibilities alive and keeping the world going, essentially. Endgame is not the end of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Endgame is sort of the end of Iron Man, Black Widow's, and Captain America's story. That is what Endgame is, and I think they did a really good job at passing the torch in that film from old to new. Um, the criticisms I have are Tony's end line is not good. I get sort of where they're going, but there were several things you could have said in the instance where Tony dies that would have been better than what he did say. Not that what he didn't say, not that what he said wasn't good. It was okay. It just could have been better. And I think it would have been pretty easy to make it better. So that's sort of a complaint I have about that, but other than that, they handled Tony really well. Another thing I think they do sort of meh at is the whole, they tried to explain how time travel worked. I didn't really get what they were talking about half the time, because they're talking about, like, the past-future thing. I feel like I get what they were trying to say, but the way they said it was a little ambiguous for me to understand the true limitations of what they're talking about. And it half sounded to me like they were trying to say something that sounded smart so that the audience wouldn't question it, which is not a... I didn't like that. I feel like they still handled the time travel overall pretty well, but I just sort of was like, what exactly are you meaning by that? What exactly are you meaning by the past-future thing? How... because what they're trying to explain is how, if you go back in time and change something, you don't change your future, you change someone else's future. And I get that, I think, unless you understand it differently, and I just got it completely wrong, which, let me know, because I make mistakes and misinterpret things all the time. But if you're trying to say that, you didn't need the offhand remark earlier, done by Hulk, if the Ancient One was just going to explain it all anyway. The other thing that I didn't get was, how are you going to return everything at the exact time that it left if the time it leaves, it isn't there? So how do you make sure there's zero inconsistency? Because time is weird, and so if those things are gone for like a split second, things can go crazy for some reason. But, like, the thing I don't get is, so Captain America returns everything. How does he convince past future Captain America that he's returning them and not stealing them from a different future? Because that's a whole can of worms in and of itself, and I don't think that... they didn't have time to go through that, I understand that, but I don't think the way that it happened was enough for me personally to understand what was going on and how what they were talking about worked. Now, suspension of disbelief, it's time travel. It's time travel. That's the catch-all. So it's not a deal breaker for me, but it's like, I feel like you could have maybe done a bit more, but you were doing a lot. I understand that, but I feel like you could have done a bit better. But I think, all in all, the time travel worked really well, and they had some really unique takes on it. I just think that it's time travel, and so it's always going to be a bit ambiguous as to how it actually is supposed to function, which is kind of always going to be the case with time travel. So, my next point is, Endgame, from a standalone perspective, is awful. If you watch Endgame just by itself, it will make absolutely no sense, because Endgame is basically a highlight reel of every movie in the MCU up to that point, almost. With the exception of 2 or 3. And I think that it doesn't need to be a standalone film, that's not its goal. Which is why I'm also fine with that. I just think that if you're going to see Endgame as your first Marvel movie, you're going to be very confused, unfortunately. So I would definitely try and find a list of, like, I think it's in the last video, a list of movies that you should at least see before you see Endgame, at least the bare minimum, for it to make sense. And I think, all in all, other than that, it's great, honestly. They did some very different takes on a lot of the older characters that I can get behind a little. they're definitely changing as characters, which is what I like to see. I don't want to watch Thor 1 again, but with a different plot. I'd like to see the character of Thor actually like progress as a person, because otherwise it's just Thor beating up things like he did in the first Thor, and I've seen that. Give me something new is sort of my take on that. So all in all, I think that they did a very good job putting everything together. They made sure to leave plenty of new arcs that can go off in different directions, and they made sure to put out new ideas for what could happen in the MCU. And they definitely handled almost, yeah, I would say they handled almost every single character with a good degree of respect, especially the older ones, in terms of making sure that they were true to how they progressed and were true to how they actually felt about things. And so, yeah, I think it's a good movie, honestly. And I think that the way Black Widow dies is fine. I know a couple people are like, but that's not really her character. And to that I would say it's not her character when she first shows up, but you can see her character change across the movies, and that becomes who she is. And so I feel like that is in line with how her character has changed, which is fine with me. I like characters who change because it shows that they're human and not boards of wood like Brie Larson. I mean, not Brie Larson, Captain Marvel. Brie Larson, I don't know that much about her. She may be a very vibrant personality for all I know, but Brie Larson's the actor who plays Captain Marvel, and Captain Marvel definitely did not the greatest job at acting like a person with emotions. Now, I'm open to that changing, because Thor wasn't a very personable person in the first Thor either, but I feel like that character needs more humanity in them, or at least a better defined inhumanity in them, so that you can at least get behind the emotions of the character. Even in some way, being able to tell that they're suppressing themselves would be better than just not being able to tell that they're suppressing themselves at all and then being a jerk the entire film. I don't think that is helpful, and it doesn't make them a good character, even if you as the writer know what's going on in their head. You need to convey that to the audience well, and I don't think Captain Marvel did that. But in terms of Endgame, I feel like you could have used more Captain Marvel. I really don't know why they took her out so much. Like, she wasn't really present. I guess if her personality hadn't changed that much, I'm fine with that, because honestly, the less of that type of person in that film, the better, because that would have derailed most of the feel of the film. But if they had been able to succinctly show a character change in her that served the narrative better, I would have loved to see more Captain Marvel. So, yeah. All in all, great movie. The end fight scenes are awesome and very triumphant. And I think that, all in all, definitely would watch it again. If a group of friends of mine goes and sees it and invites me, I'll definitely hop on and go and see it again, because it's worth it, I think. And I'll probably buy it, too, which I don't buy many movies, honestly. So, yeah. Other than that, comment your thoughts on the film. I'd love to see other people's ideas on what was good, what was bad, what was ugly. And I'd love to sort of have feedback on that, because my opinion can change. If it does, I'll put out another video on how it's changed, probably next week or the week after. And if not, you won't see another video on this, probably, because if there's nothing more for me to say, then I don't need to just repeat this video on a different day, because that ultimately wastes my time and your time. So, yeah, other than that, have a great rest of your day. There will be another video this weekend, start of a new type of series I'm thinking of doing. And we'll see how it goes. It's an interesting idea, and I hope it's fun. I hope you enjoy it. That is all I really hope for on this channel, is that you enjoy it and learn something from it. So yeah, Other than that, have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next thing you see me in. Bye!